Good evening. It's I think, like Ross pointed out a few moments ago, it's quite a challenging period at this moment in time, but where there's challenges, there's also opportunity. What I'll present today is a bit of background on where the market's at this moment in time, where we think it's going to go, how we're working in the current climate, and more importantly, with what's going on, like I said about the opportunity, how you take advantage of that moving forward as much as possible. Bit of background on private finance for probably been here before. So we're a London-based brokerage. I've got a little office in Shropshire, and we're whole of market. So at the moment, the value is with a lot of building societies, and I'll explain that in a few moments, and private banks, rather than your high street banks. So market update. What's going on in the world at this moment in time? Mortgages are still available. The press have a habit of blowing things completely out of perspective. When they say mortgages withdrawn, I'll give the context behind that in a few moments. So finance is available. This is completely different to 2007. In 2007, the banks ran out of money. You remember people going to the cash points, drawing money out of the cash points, Northern Rock being one of them, GMAC, RFC. So many of the banks just went, had no money. It's completely different now. Banks have been sensible, I'd like to say, over the last 15 years. Stress tested at the right levels. Buy-to-lets have been stress tested at the right levels. So they're in a really strong position. The news in the press just recently about lenders withdrawing from the market, I'll give you the context in a few moments and explain. Private rented sector and the buy-to-let market remains integral to the UK economy. So despite changing government or changing tax legislation, there's still huge demand there. And it might be that the way we think about buy-to-let shifts a little bit. So rather than it being short-term, get rich quick, it might be now that it's a longer-term investment, paying down the debt. We'll look at that in different routes. So you just adapt with the market. That's the big thing. The issue is there are people out there that can't adapt to the market, and that's where the opportunity will come. Clearly, things have changed drastically over the last 4 weeks, and when I say drastically, I think that's an understatement. This is just going to give you a bit of an explanation about how banks work. And whilst the Bank of England base rate is at 2.25%, Kwasi Kwarteng did a brilliant job for the Bank of England by completely messing it up. Interest rates shot up as a result of that mini budget, but it wasn't the Bank of England base rate that increased. It was something called SONIA swaps. It used to be known as LIBOR. They changed the branding of it. So December, or use October actually, 2021, a 5-year swaps was at 0.82%. So a swap in layman terms, you're Santander, I'm NatWest, you've got surplus funds, I'd buy them from you at 0.82%, then I'd sell them out. Yeah? 5-year swaps today is at 4.55%. So that means that banks can't buy in funds less than 4.55%. So that's why you're seeing mortgage rates at 5%, 6%. So what we've done just recently is shift, which we've always done, but more so, using the building societies that are mutuals. Their funds are from their savers. They're not relying on swaps rates. So when we're talking about mortgage lending still being there, it's actually just digging out the deals, working with building societies, showing how we operate. So SONIA swaps are incredibly important to specialist lenders. Specialist lenders now are your old subprime lenders. They're just branded in a different way. Specialist lenders are people like, for example, let's use one, Lendinvest. Lendinvest have just come back into the market today because the SONIA swaps have dropped slightly. So it means they're able to buy funds again and start selling mortgages. Yeah? So the specialist lending market, when you saw it in the press, people are withdrawing from the market and going crazy. It was actually people who were relying on buying their funds from swaps. So that gives some context really as to why interest rates have increased so quickly whilst the Bank of England base rate is still only at 2.25%. The Bank of England base rate is likely to settle at probably 3.5%, 4%, we expect. Everybody's putting their finger in the air and guessing. And that's probably not a bad thing. If you were lucky enough, or depending on where you're at, if you were in the buy-to-let market in 2005, 4, 5, interest rates were at 5.5%, 6, 7% at that stage if you were borrowing again from people like GMAC or Northern Rock at that stage. So, of course, house prices increased. But as a result of house prices increasing, mortgage rates increasing, house prices are likely to come back down. So it's just when you're buying your buy-to-let properties now, it's adjusting to make sure it all fits, not buying something just because it looks pretty. What to do next? I suppose this is kind of touching on investment advice. It's not. It's just from our point of view, it's hysteria at this moment in time, and it just needs to calm down and look at it in a broad way. The hysteria is coming because, particularly on the residential front, at this moment in time, payments increasing quite significantly. Stay calm. That's a big thing. Review your portfolio, making sure you're getting the right rents out of it. That's where an agent looks at it for you regularly. Look at how you can maximise the return on your investment. Do all of a sudden you look at perhaps putting a HMO in your market to extend the yield, extend the returns. Things aren't going to change in terms of reduction, I don't think, in terms of interest rates drastically. I don't think tax is going to get better. So when you look at it, factoring worst case scenario, Graham will be going through the tax side of things in a few moments. Without a chancellor, it's difficult to say, but so it's really important that when you're looking at your figures, work on 5, 7, 8% interest rates in your modelling and see if it still stacks up at that stage. We know property tends to be consistent. Ross has just gone through that a few moments ago, and it's steady growth. It's only, you only do bad in property when you sell at the wrong time. We know that, and you do well in property when you sell at the right time. Huge demand, as I mentioned a few moments ago, and tenants are still looking for good quality accommodation. I think here, we were talking about interest rates increasing. If you had your funds in stock at this moment in time, stock's down 23%. So when you're all of a sudden talking about, and with property, of course, you can gear. So it's a little bit different. Stock's your own money, whereas with property, you're in a position to be able to gear and reduce that risk. So the big opportunity that we recognise as mortgage brokers for landlords in particular is a lot of landlords exiting the market, poorly geared, poor finance, poor property that might not be able to reach the standards to be able to get a mortgage nowadays, EPCs. The opportunity of being slightly more creative with your properties. I think we'll probably see an increase in HMOs. I've never been a huge fan of HMOs, if I'm honest, personally, but as a result of the cost of living crisis, there's likely to be a shift of people looking for good quality accommodation, in my opinion, at lower values where the heating bills are included. And that's where you buy a property, renovate it, make sure it's incredibly energy efficient, you've got the right heating systems in, and this is what I'm going to go on to in a few moments, about buying run-down properties, how to improve them and get your money back out to recycle it to go into other property, to buy other properties. And holiday lets, whilst this kind of contradicts what we're here for, but will there be more of a demand in the UK to remain here with the cost of living overseas, the cost of going overseas, the euro, the dollar to the pound, everything becomes more expensive. So growing your portfolio, it's difficult to come here today with a kind of an exact science, but there are, in any market, there's always ways to buy, really, and it's just at what cost. I'll be discussing bridge to let in particular for the purpose of a 15-minute slot, so it's one area of mortgages. And it all looks very simple, saying build to let, building equity, adding value, but you need to be able to move on. You've got to add some form of value to a property to be able to release equity and go on. You only have one deposit. If you've got 50,000 and you put that down as a 25% deposit of a £200,000 house, you're gone. You can't move on. So it's how you're looking for the value so that you can move it on. And Simon, who's here to present later on, I'm sure he's an absolute expert in it. But I'll give you the context, how you do it from a finance perspective. So the one area that I want to focus on is bridge to let. Buying a property below market value, you might think that's crazy, but coming into, if we wait 6, 12, 8 months, whatever, down the line, there will be opportunity. There'll be distressed sellers. There'll be landlords that have made their buck. They bought their property in 2009, 10, 11, probably had decent interest rates, probably made a reasonable return, and they're thinking, I don't want to be in this anymore. I can't afford to pay to bring it up to standard for the EPCs because it's going to be expensive to be able to do that. And distressed, actually to them isn't distressed. They might make a 20, 30% return. So bridging finance has always been a scary word and expensive. The reality is at this moment in time it's not. In fact, it's probably the same interest rate as a mortgage. So bridging finance providers are funded generally in a different way, again, to the mortgage side of things. So United Trust Bank, one of the bridging finance providers, offers bonds. So they get their money in from savings bonds. So they'll offer you 4.5% to take your money off you for a year. Yeah? So they then offer it out as bridging finance at 6%, which is exactly the same as a residential 5-year fixed rate mortgage at this moment in time. So bridging actually isn't expensive. It was scary because people weren't prepared with the exit, and again, we have a tendency of bad press. So it works well. You'd acquire a property that's in poor state of repair, generally at around 75% gross loan to value. Yeah? How it works with bridging finance, they tend to take off the interest off your 12-month loan as well. I won't overcomplicate it, but if you bought 100,000 and it was 75% loan to value, you get 75% gross, but then they take 12 months worth of interest off that, so you might end up with 70,000 net. Yeah? In most cases, they also give you the funding to do the works in arrears. So if you've got a £50,000 project and you've only got £10,000 from the first phase, great, you spend that and the money's released in arrears, then you do the next lot of work in arrears because the value is increasing throughout. One provider in particular, they offer your bridging loan as you go in, but they're valuing it based on the schedule of works that you give them on the day that you apply for the bridging loan. So you've got your exit already lined up. Reduces the risk drastically, particularly in uncertain times when we're slightly concerned about property values, and that's called bridge to let. So you're applying for the bridging loan, but at the same time they're giving you a mortgage offer for exit, and they do interim inspections to make sure it's being built to the standard that you told them you were going to build it to. And this is a great way of adding value to a portfolio. The trick here is buying right, and we're expecting to buy right, I hope, over the course of the next 12 months, 18 months, maybe 2 years. And this is why I said at the very start, being patient and not snapping at it. So, again, conscious of time, a working example, it kind of looks rather arrogant, but it's easier to talk about when you do it yourself. Last year I bought one in Ironbridge for 180,000, stamp duty was 5,400. We overspent on it actually, 100,000, but the reason why we overspent was to future-proof ourselves with EPC standards. So we actually built the house in a house. So stood walls, insulation, it's 1800s house. That was the only way that we could bring it up to EPC standards, future-proofing. I took a bridging loan on that, so the bridging loan on the facility was it was slightly more expensive because it was a small loan, let's say circa 0.8 a month. So the total cost for that project for me to do and deliver was 297,000. The end value, I had an RICS valuation partway through doing the works. Market value is probably more like 400,000. I remortgaged back out at 275 on that particular property. Yeah. So the in costs, really, I've only put £25,000 of my own money in because I've taken the majority of it back out. If I bought a £400,000 property with a 25% deposit, you're best putting best part of 100,000 of your own money in. You can't really go far. You can't really grow property your portfolio. So gearing helps you move along. It might be a case that you don't want to do this, you're beyond that, and you just want to tidy your portfolio up. I'm here to say that mortgage finance is absolutely there. The rates have changed, but that was always going to happen. We had a period of interest rates where they were ridiculously low. There are going to be a lot of people distressed, which is distressed sellers as a result of what's happened with the interest rates. That's not great. But sometimes you look at it as a distressed seller, and actually it's only distressed because they want to sell at that moment in time. The reality is they might have made really reasonable returns, happy to let it go for a lot less than what we think. That's where the auction side of things is pretty decent. You'll notice I haven't really touched on interest rates today and talking about actual cost of borrowing at this moment in time. And the reality is it's so difficult to talk about that at this moment in time. So it's better to talk about what we can do, how you structure it, how you go about growing your portfolio, rather than talking about the actual cost. That's a quick call into us and we can model it quite quickly and say, right, if you buy that house for 150,000, this is the deposit you need, this is the return you'll make. But what's really important with mortgages is cash is all your own risk. I talked about this at the last seminar we did. If you bought a house at 150,000 and house prices drop by 10%, that's your money. If you geared, if you borrowed money, you can ride the storm. It's not all of your own money. That's the beauty of a mortgage when you're buying in property. Mortgages now you can take to Leeds building site, a perfect example. you could apply at age 85 and take a 40-year mortgage term on interest only. So you can take some of your debt out, if you had that property unencumbered, and go and enjoy it. Go and buy a holiday home in Cornwall, go and buy a house in Spain. So mortgages are integral really to enjoying the fruits of your labour. And borrowing, let's face it, borrowing is still incredibly cheap, even at 5%. It's just you've got to shift the model of your portfolio, what you're buying, how you go about buying it, what value you can add to be able to move on. So this is just that property there that we did in our own research, what it was like, 180,000, and the end value, the end property. So look, if I can do it, a short, fat, bald man, anybody in this room can do it. So, sorry?
I bid on that.
Oh, did you? There you go. So, yeah, that's it. So, yeah, look, we do plenty of other types of finance. It's always difficult to get everything in a 15-minute slot. Pick my brains after, go through anything with me. We cover every type of mortgage going in whole of market. Yeah, any questions really?
With the your renovation of the house, how did you forecast the return on that investment afterwards?
So they value it at the stage that you're buying it. You have something called a GDV, a gross development value. So when you buy the property initially, when you're applying for your finance, you provide the bank with a schedule of works to say, I'm going to spend 10,000 on a kitchen, 3,000 on flooring, and with that information they know the spec that it's going to be generally. If I put a £2,000 kitchen in it, it's not going to be worth 400,000 at the end of it. So they look at your schedule of works, and based on your schedule of works, they give you an estimate value based on the end. But there are providers out there that will actually give you your mortgage offer. Of course, you're getting interim inspections, but they give you a mortgage offer for your bridging and for your buy-to-let based on the future value.
Thank you.
Anything else? No? Good. Pick my brains after if you want to. Thank you.